Uniqueness is a real value of Cosmos. The goal is not to move beyond uniqueness. The goal is to actually realize uniqueness and to understand that uniqueness is not separateness. So we're in this time between worlds. We're in this time between stories. We haven't been at this time actually ever in history before. It's never happened. The only kind of time that's relatively similar to it in the last few hundred years that we have a kind of obvious access to, if we actually understand what was happening there, was the Renaissance. The Renaissance was also a time between worlds, a time between stories in which the old world was breaking down. The worlds of medieval or pre-modern science and pre-modern sexuality and pre-modern understandings of the divine and pre-modern understandings of value and pre-modern understandings of meaning itself and of relationship between human beings and of touch and of universality or particularity, right? Everything, medicine. It all lived in a certain context, what C.S. Lewis calls the discarded image of the pre-modern. And it all began breaking down. And that breakdown exploded in the form of a plague, and the plague was called the Black Death. And the Black Death sweeps Europe, and there's no known approach to it, and there's a huge vaccine war, although there's obviously no vaccines, but there's a huge conflict of major proportions that rocks Europe in terms of how to understand the plague. And in the middle of all of this, as a quarter to half of Europe lays dying, there's this small group of people in Firenze and in Florence, and they kind of step out of the politics of the papal state. Lots of politics in the papal state and the different cities and the wars between different cities. And Shakespeare, of course, is a little bit in that context, the states and the cities of Italy and their relationship to each other. But there's this group of people that step out of it. And they actually realize that it's a pivoting point in humanity, that it's a time between worlds in which the old world is breaking down, but the new world hasn't yet emerged. They can't get to every place of suffering in Europe or Asia. They realize that the future hasn't yet been born and that the future needs to be birthed. We need to access a memory of the future. And the Renaissance was the articulation of the memory of a future, right? A new story, a new possible story for humanity that emerges, and that is what we call modernity. And as we've said here many times, the strength of the new story, to the extent that they understood that there's a new story and that they got the plot lines right, the accurate plot lines laid out by Marcello Ficino and Da Vinci and Pico della, what's the last name? I can never pronounce his last name. Mendola, right? However you pronounce his last name. Right? That whole gang, Da Vinci, that gathers, that's funded by Cosimo Medici and Lorenzo de Medici. And by the way, I'm meeting with Lorenzo. Lorenzo de Medici actually somehow shows up in my world, the present one in this generation, at a talk, recently. So we'll be talking this week. But they have this moment in which they come together and they tell this new story. And to the extent that they got the plot lines right, they birthed what we've called here many times the dignities of modernity, whether that was the emergence of universal human rights or the scientific method or third-person perspective or new forms of realism and depth in art and new kinds of music and new understandings of the relationship of the sexes and what it means to be a man and a woman and sexuality itself and eros and natural law, right? All of it, right? Modern medicine at its best. Antibiotics at their best. All of that emerges out of getting the plot lines right. And to the precise extent, my friends, that they get the plot lines wrong, reality goes off, reality moves in a direction, not of value, but of anti-value. The storyline gets lost. a success story steps in and becomes a plot line. So in the vacuum of full plot line, meaning in the place where modernity didn't get it right, and the stuff they skipped, in the directional movements of cosmos that they ignored and thought would take care of themselves, in that vacuum, what's born is what we call the success story. The modern success story, which is rivalrous conflict, rivalrous conflict, governed by win-lose metrics. That's one of the core generator functions of modernity, which in turn produces fragile systems, systems that optimize for efficiency, not for resiliency. Fragility, or what are called by Dave Snowden complicated systems, meaning systems where the parts don't know each other, which are prone to collapse. So, for example, there's a plague that comes out of Wuhan, China, probably a lab leak, and it shuts down airports all over the world and shuts down, everyone stays at home, right? People don't even know how to manufacture masks, let alone to understand where the virus came from, how to respond to the virus, right? Accurate feeds of information that would actually create coherence in the public trust and being able to respond. All that's not possible. There's this phenomenal breakdown in the information ecology, right? And you get this dress rehearsal, right, of catastrophic risk, right? Where the system that seemed to be completely coherent and completely resilient actually turns out to be fragile. And literally out of nowhere, you're not allowed to leave your house. And you don't even know whether the science is accurate telling you not to leave your house because you're getting contradictory vectors of information. That's because the system itself is fragile, because the plot line at the center of the system, or at least one dimension of the plot line, has become a success story. So there's all these plot lines that are actually successful that I've already talked about, that introduce scientific method and a sense of universal human rights that people take seriously, and democracy and new forms of governance, right? All that stuff I talked about, that comes from the best plot lines, and in which we actually talk about how we gather information, how we analyze information. We move from relying on my own first-person experience to also having a third-person method of verification, and that produces notions of peer review, and it produces what I called just a few minutes ago, the scientific method. All that stuff, all that's great, but there's this breakdown at the center in one part of the plot line, which is, where are we going? It's a breakdown in meaning, right? There's actually a fundamental meaning crisis. And at the core of the meaning crisis is a failure to actually chart a vision of inherent value, right? Where's the cosmos going? Telos gets thrown out of science. And it's a fascinating story, which we'll tell in one of the upcoming books in the Great Library. How does telos get thrown out of science? In the mid-19th century, it kind of finally happens, but telos gets thrown out, right? Reality's not going anywhere. But the notion that you would claim that reality has an inherent telos, that it's going somewhere, is viewed as fundamentalist and religious. So telos, the notion of direction, that's religious, and that's wrong, right? There's a sense that we live in a world, right? In a world in which this world becomes, you read Andrew Marvell, right? He's fantastic, right? The great poet, right, of the dawn of modernity. And there's this intense and beautiful sense that we can rest all goodness and all fulfillment and all wonder and all beauty in this world. And we're going to actually forget about the larger issues. We're going to actually say, we're going to reject this larger view, because this larger view of the world, this view of the world as many incarnations, the view of the world of having dimensions beneath this world's dimension. Everyone with me? That view of the world was hijacked by different religious systems in order to create domination. Does everyone get that last sentence? And now we're adding something really important here. Does everyone get that? So that view of the world, does everyone get that? That view of the world, which said, oh, there's multiple incarnations, there's multiple dimensions, there's multiple vectors, that what you see in this world's not the whole story. So that view of the world got hijacked. Everyone get that? Got hijacked big time by ethnocentric, fundamentalist, dogmatic systems. And so modernity said, take that out of the picture. Just tell me how many people got that. It's a very big deal to get that. Modernity said, take that out of the picture. We're not interested in those. So those plot lines, which were essential, right, to the ancient and pre-modern world, because they got hijacked, modernity threw them out. Does everyone get that? So modernity says, okay, in our plot lines, we're going to skip value. We're just going to assume value. And we wrote about that in the book, right? First Principles and First Values. There's an entire section on how modernity just assumes what we might call common sense, sacred axioms of value, but skips the actual discussion about how do we know they're true? Where are they from? Right? So we say, oh, we hold these truths to be self-evident. Huh. Like the most important truths of value you hold to be self-evident. Where are they from? Where's that self-evidence from? Or they would ascribe it to old versions of natural law. And it doesn't work, right? It doesn't work. And there is no value without indivisible dimensions of things. Not true. Value means there's something that's beyond the immediate. Right? There's something that's beyond the rational calculus. Right? Value means, right, that there's a field of value in which is the ground in which everything arises. It's what Plato calls, right, he says, right, from the invisible comes the visible, sensible God, but the visible, sensible God, right, means the field of value. Right? There is no value, right, without being sourced in that which is beneath. Right? So if all of the manifest world would disappear, there would still be value. Value evolves, shifts, discloses new faces in response to this manifest world. But value itself is the ground of all being. That's critical. But I find value in speech, language, right, expresses value, but language emerges from the silence. As language is not merely an agreement, language is, as the interior scientists pointed out, right, a coded expression of an inherent field of value. Wow. And in silence, let's go from language to silence. Silence, when I go deep into the silence, I have a direct experience, an unmediated experience with value itself. When I dance, right, what all practice is about opening the eye of value, and the eye of value is itself the invisible made visible. Right? I actually feel in my body the entire field of value at play. Okay? Wow. So value is not the valuation I do. It's not a commodification. It's not a valuation, although that's a later usage of it. And its value itself got exiled. Value itself got exiled to doing a valuation. But value is not that. Value is, it's immeasurable. It's not commodifiable, right? You feel it, you know it inherently and intrinsically. It's the source of all life, and it's why I'm often willing to lay my life down for it, right? For this invisible order, right? Which is about the inherent rightness of cosmos. There's a rightness to cosmos, right? There's a direction, there's a telos, right? There's an inherent fairness that should be. And we know that fairness, that justice should be, that goodness should be, that kindness should be, not because of a rational calculus. And it's not reducible to a rational calculus, okay? Not reducible to a rational calculus, but it's not homo economicus. It's not the rational actor. Now, the rational actor can align with value, but value is underneath, it's deeper, okay? So the intention, what are we doing here? What are we doing here? We're actually here in this time between worlds, in this time between stories, which is a moment like the Renaissance, just like the Renaissance, same moment, except for we have existential technologies. We have existential risk. We have technologies that can actually destroy the planet, which have developed exponentially more sophisticated forms than they were in World War II when the first mushroom cloud explodes over Hiroshima and Nagasaki. There are exponential technologies that are available to rogue non-state actors. That's one form of existential risk, and there's about 10 other forms. So now we're at this moment, we're in this time between worlds, time between stories, with massively distributed existential risk technologies. And these existential risk technologies can actually either end humanity, that possibility never existed, or they can cause the death of our humanity. Okay? So, right, that's the structure we're in. So we're in this time between worlds, time between stories. So what do we need to do? So we need to make the Da Vinci move. And the Da Vinci move is we're not going to deny existential risk. We're not going to take a doomer position. We're going to actually talk about this and experience this as the dawn, not denial, not doomer. It's the dawn of a new age. And that new age is a Da Vinci age. And by Da Vinci, we mean, right, as artists, as social artists, right, as spiritual artists, right, as world philosophers, right, as those who are willing to take responsibility for the whole and bear that unbearable burden with unbearable love. We have to respond and actually tell a new story of value. We have to tell a new story of meaning, but not made up meaning. And it's Viktor Frankl made that paradoxical postmodern move. He writes this book. It was originally called Death Camps and Existentialism. That didn't sell well. So he changed it to Man's Search for Meaning. And he talks about this fundamental human drive searching for meaning, but he was so caught up in the ethos of his day that when he talks about, he called the school, after he survives the Holocaust, he calls the school logotherapy. He basically says, but all this meaning is made up. None of it's real. And it's a survival mechanism. So as dramatic and as beautiful as his book, Man's Search for Meaning is, right, his larger logotherapy essentially says that this is some human survival drive, right? And meaning is ultimately not real. He couldn't move beyond that moment in his day. Now, stay close. For Frankl, it didn't matter because he was one of those people who philosophically said meaning is not ultimately real, but he lived it in a way that it was so real that his philosophy didn't matter. So Viktor Frankl writes right after World War II, he's writing out of Europe when existentialism has swept Europe, but no one really believes it. Everyone really experiences in their life that value is actually real, even if you deny it philosophically. There's a funny, and I remember reading Sartre when I was 18, 19. You read Sartre, Being and Nothingness, and it's an utter poem to meaninglessness. And yet, paradoxically, I don't know who's read this book. If you read Sartre, when you finish reading him, you're filled with this sense of meaning and purpose. Does everyone get what I mean? In other words, and as the existentialists themselves, Camus, they're so close to meaning that in their rebellion against it, meaning is still completely evident and suffuses everything they say. It's kind of like the first generation of Hebrew wisdom people, or kind of in the Jewish people, who they utterly rejected, right, the validity of the lineage and the texts and the beauty of the text. They said, we don't need any of this. Or we certainly don't need any authority from it. And we certainly don't need to be guided from it. And they were furious with the whole tradition of 2,000 years. And yet they studied it all the time and argued with it and spent all of their lives engaging it. And they assumed that they could throw it out and yet would always still be there with them. Right? Does that make sense? So existentialism, right, coming out of David Hume several hundred years earlier, assumes we can throw out meaning, but who's throwing out meaning? There's a group of men and women who are spending all day and night writing about meaning. Then along comes postmodernity, and postmodernity actually breaks the contract and says, no, you can't assume meaning. You can't assume meaning, right? And everyone knows my next sentence, right? You took a loan out from pre-modernity, hidden capital of meaning. You're assuming meaning. You're assuming value. You can't do that. Value is not real. And this postmodern chill, right, begins to chill humanity. And it appears in movies like Barbie. It appears in tragic story, Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson just fought Jake Paul, right? Right? Beautiful Jake, right? Fights Jake Paul, beautiful Mike, right? And then Mike does an interview right after this insane, crazy kind of staged fight, right? And there's a whole conversation we can have about what that is, right? In the modern moment, what is an influencer and how that all works and doesn't work and what's beautiful about it and what's tragic about it. But that's not our conversation now. But in any case, so this fight takes place, in the United States that gets, full haul and, some insane amount of viewership. And then a 14-year-old girl interviews Mike Tyson after the fight and says, how does this affect your legacy? Right. And Tyson says, legacy. And I'm not quoting him directly, but he basically says, fuck legacy. Legacy is when I'm dead. When I'm dead, there's nothing. There's nothing when I'm dead. Nothing matters. I have no legacy. I don't give a fuck how it expresses, right, and affects my legacy. That's just nonsense. It's like, wow. Like, wow. Like, wow, right? Like, wow. And it's heartbreaking, actually. It's heartbreaking, right? So Mike Tyson is one of, I could cite you 1,000 sources, and we've talked about a more, kind of formal, popular source like Yuval Harari. But Yuval's not saying something different, actually, than Mike Tyson. Yuval's saying we've got to do everything we can to make a better world, but ultimately, you die, it's over. There's no intrinsic meaning, there's no inherent meaning, right? End game. And we lost the plot line. Does everyone get what I'm saying? We lost the plot line. And when you lose the plot line, when you basically declare that value is not real, then the only thing you can see in front of you is the world of the visible, but the material visible. You can't actually open the eye of value, which is as empirical as the material visible, right? We stake our lives on the eye of value, or the eye of the heart, the eye of the heart, or the eye of consciousness, or the eye of the spirit. And it's the eye of transfiguration, but it's the eye that feels the reality of dimensions and does an enormous amount of empirical research also to show that they're true. But we lost the thread, right? What we're here to do in One Mountain, Many Paths is we're here to literally reweave the source code of reality in the way that they began to do in the Renaissance, but stopped. They did part of it, right? They reset. They began to tell a new story, but they left out the most important plot lines. And they thought they could get away with it because everyone would just assume that meaning is real. And they would just assume that value is real. But they were wrong. We can't make that assumption, right? And you can't begin to understand neoliberal politics, right, which are infused with postmodernity, nor populist strongman politics, breaking out around the world every place, without understanding this breakdown in the field of value. So when there's a field of value, we trust each other because we each understand that we're incarnations of this inherent field of value. So there's a sense of trust. We can have a conversation in which we trust legacy institutions, in which we trust, right, scientific process, right, in which we trust each other in some deep way. There's a deep conversation at the center. But when trust is exploded, because the assumption is that there's no field of value, so what happens is the essential intimate communion at the center of culture breaks down, right? This postmodern moment begins to infuse, paradoxically, populism. And what populism says is don't trust anyone, except for perhaps me, the strong leader. I just trust the strong leader. But that's the first move of totalitarianism, is trust only the strong leader, because there's no field of value to actually trust. Does everyone get that? It's a big deal, right? We're basically one person or one tiny group of people, the elite, the Ministry of Love and George Orwell's 1984, right? Trust who? Trust just us. Trust just us. Because that's the only thing that's real. The only thing that's real is me, my little group, my party, right? The brotherhood, right? The Ministry of Love. There's nothing else to trust. That's the source of populism. The source of it's the source of totalitarianism, right, is that there's not a field of value, right, out of which we create a common story of value, which can actually allow us to challenge injustice, to challenge the lie, to challenge the people of the lie, right? To challenge the failures of kindness, to challenge the failures of ethos, to challenge the failures of goodness. Without a field of value, the conversation can't happen. And paradoxically, stay close, friends, the neoliberal world that wants to challenge the strongman can't actually do it effectively because it's dislocated itself in its own self-experience and its own self-perception from the field of value. That's what we've been talking about here, one way or the other, or it's one thread of 10 threads that we've been talking about, right? As I've kind of read, for example, the literature in the last, X amount of years, challenging populism, right? Both the literature and the critique of artificial intelligence, the critique of, kind of potential digital dictatorships through the web, or the critique of any number of other populist positions in politics, the critique falls flat because although it says the right words, it invokes the right popular phrases. Even God gets invoked, right? God gets invoked, but it's very clear that no one really believes it, right? There's a postmodern infusion which runs through the entire neoliberal world. So what do we need to do? What we need to do is we need to actually crack value theory, understand why value theory collapsed. Why did it collapse? Why did it collapse? So it collapsed for a whole bunch of reasons I'm not talking about right now, but it collapsed for some really good reasons. We need to literally go and I want to stay closer, and this is our topic for today. Our topic for today is unique risk. Okay, unique risk. And I want to kind of share with you about unique risk, and everything that I want to try and say in these next few minutes is all going to be all about unique risk. So I want to argue that and suggest that, right, that our unique risk as human beings in this moment in time, and in particular our unique risk here in One Mountain, Many Paths, in the seat of revolution, our unique risk is to actually be able to see the whole, to actually be able to see everything that we just outlined right now. And there's a short paper that I worked on, and Lane and I then worked on, called Love or Die, which actually kind of articulates this fairly clearly. And so we'll try and send it to anyone who's new, and we'll have it always in the chat box. But it's a crazy big deal. It's a crazy big deal, right? And love or die means that if we don't articulate a new vision of loving, but not a new age vision, right? Not a mythopoetic vision. It's not even, we got to start with an artistic vision, but it's got to become a cogent, coherent philosophical vision that I can explain to any seventh grader or fourth grader or third grader and any graduate student and any initiate practicing deeply in a tradition. And I need to be able to explain it in all over China and all over Russia and all over Poland and all over the Maldives, right? And all over South America and all through Africa, right? We need a shared grammar of value as the context for our diversity. We can't move without it. We need a shared story of value. We need to identify the plot lines. To do that, we need to revivify the field of value and to revivify the field of Eros, the field of Eros value. So our unique risk, now stay close, and this is crazy big. There's lots of great things to do in the world. Okay, there's lots of projects to get involved with, but it's very easy. I know myself, right? There's I want to just say this tenderly. There's 10 books that I'm dying to write. And none of them have to do with the meta crisis, and none of them have to do with revivifying the field of value. They're just topics that I'm madly, insanely interested in. And those topics have something to do with kind of the interior experiences of beauty and of Eros and of silence and of laughter and of dance, and right, and kind of understanding those in their deepest scientific context. There's a whole library I want to write. I probably won't get to write at least a lot of it in this lifetime. Some of it maybe, right? But I have to actually take a unique risk, and my unique risk is, and I need to take it together with my best friends who are here, with my family. And I've been with my son all weekend. And one of the things that we do when we're together, we just jump into the bed and we kind of cuddle up and we watch Flash. We watch whatever superhero we're watching. Flash has like, I don't know, 150 episodes. It's a Marvel show, and Flash is a superhero. And there's what's called Team Flash. And Team Flash is this group of like 7, 8, 9, 10 people who gather around, right, to actually take this responsibility for, okay, right, sorry, I apologize for this coming down. I'm going to close my computer, sorry, for saving the world, right? For saving the world. And people are watching Flash, and they use this kind of, again, this Marvel super. And saving the world means not I put on a cape, but it means I put on a cape, meaning I'm actually willing to see the whole. I actually trust myself to see the whole, right? I actually study carefully, right? I look at the whole thing. I gather people, we gather together, right? In One Mountain, Many Paths, in the Center for World Philosophy and Religion, right? We pretend to be a think tank, but really we're a band of outrageous lovers taking responsibility for the whole, right? We are, in Tolkien's terms, we would call it the Fellowship of the Ring. That's what Tolkien was talking about, the Fellowship of the Ring. Or, you know, in terms of my son and I have been in the last couple of days, we're Team Flash. Team Flash. And Team Flash means, what I mean by Team Flash is we're in, right? That we're evolutionary family to each other. We care about each other, right, insanely. And our unique risk, every single person who's involved in this Team Flash, in this band of outrageous lovers, in this think tank, in this unique self symphony, right? Every single one of us that's involved, and every single person who's on this call right now, or you wouldn't be on this call, right? And everyone, I'm going to invite everyone to step in one step closer to Team Flash. That's just what they call it, Team Flash. And Team Flash, and it's like we're taking responsibility for the whole. And in order to do this, we have to take our unique risk, because every one of us could be doing something else. And every one of us could be doing something else that's actually meaningful, but that actually matters, right? There's lots that needs to be done. There's local things, right, that need to be done. Right? Local charities, there's books that need to be written. There's important, social work that needs to be done in kindergarten, that needs to be taught in, and spiritual communities to join, and practices to do, and psychological work to do, and that, and family work to do. And that's all valuable. It's all beautiful, but that's not Team Flash. That's not Team Flash. It's beautiful. Team Flash is, let me give it another name. If Team Flash is kind of too hard for you, let's go back to the Renaissance, when Cosimo Medici, together with Marcello Ficinio, starts the Florentine Platonic Academy. That was also Team Flash. It was the small group of people. Or let's go to the Zohar, written by Simon, son of Yochai, that actually, it's the major work that creates Lurianic Kabbalah, that actually defines in many ways the Renaissance, right? Defines actually Ficinio's Platonic Academy, has enormous influence on Ficinio's Platonic Academy and on Medici and many other figures of that time. And the people that wrote it were Team Flash. They were the band of outrageous lovers. They were a group actually of 8 people at the core. And surrounding those 8 people, there was another 50. And surrounding those 50, there was another 100. And surrounding those 100, there was another 1,000. Surrounding those 1,000, there was another 5,000. But it was this small group of people that come together not to be spectators. And the idea is not, I don't want to draw your attention to be a spectator to a spectacle, right? No, we got to be in the ring. I love Jake, love Mike, but I don't want to be a spectacle to Jake and Mike, right? Kind of attracting attention in a particular way, right? And actually enacting a fight. No, let's be in the real fight. We need to be in the ring, right? And we're tag teaming in the ring. We're in the ring together. We're Team Flash together. Or go to Tolkien. We're the Fellowship of the Ring. And our unique risk, you can't be in the Fellowship of the Ring without taking your unique risk. Does that make sense? Okay, let me see if I can break this down. There's a unique risk. I can't play my instrument in the unique self symphony without taking my unique risk. What's the unique risk? So we have to talk about, one, what does it mean unique? What is unique? This is part 2. So what's the unique risk? So we need to talk about the word unique and the word risk. And my unique risk, who is my, who am I? So one, let's go slow. One, uniqueness is real. Does everyone get that? Uniqueness is real. Uniqueness is a value of cosmos. And with the first pressure waves, little uniqueness is located in the first pressure waves in the inception of cosmos. Uniqueness is real. And in a work that is with Lena right now and that Zohar worked on and Jeffrey worked on at a certain moment, right, and the kind of artistic editorial side, and it's now been passed to Lena to kind of reconfigure and reweave, right? And it's a work I spend a bunch of years writing, and we're going to kind of now take it together to the next level. There's a section on uniqueness. I think it's in that tract. There's a section on uniqueness, and it's a short history of uniqueness. And we actually need to do a short history of all of the first principles and first values. Right. So this book, First Principles and First Values, there's a list of what we've established as first principles and first values that can be validated scientifically in the interior and the exterior sciences. So one of them is uniqueness. Uniqueness is a real value of cosmos. Does everyone get that? The goal is not to move beyond uniqueness. The goal is to actually realize uniqueness and to understand that uniqueness is not separateness. Uniqueness is not separateness, not to be separate. It's not to be alienated from. It's not to be dissociated from. Separation, alienation, dissociation is the pathology of uniqueness. Does that make sense? Just like, for example, fusion would be the pathology of intimate union. Instead of intimate union, I've got fusion. I fuse with you. I become codependent in a tragic way. So that's the pathology of intimate communion, right? So separation, dissociation, right, is the pathology of appropriate autonomy. Does that make sense, everyone? I get separated, I get dissociated, I get alienated, right? Kind of like deep in, we're going deep, 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 all the way in, okay? So uniqueness is we need to do a history of each value. So each one of the first principles and first values needs its own monograph in order for us to be able to change the source code of culture. And it took me, 15 years to identify the first principles and first values. They're all evolving first principles and first values, and each one needs its own monograph. So one of them is a history of uniqueness, and a very early stage of that history of uniqueness is in the set of books we're working on right now. So uniqueness starts with the first pressure waves, and uniqueness goes all the way, uniqueness evolves all the way through matter, right? So in matter, matter keeps differentiating. So when we say that there's differentiation, let's say you read chapter 15 of Herbert Spencer's book, First Principles, the chapter is called Differentiation and Integration. So reality differentiates to more and more uniqueness. And then uniqueness itself, like a puzzle piece, becomes the currency of the Eros of integration. So when two people come together, they come together because we're differentiated uniquely, and then our uniqueness becomes the currency of our connection. So the movement of reality, the plot line of reality, is differentiation and integration, which is another way of saying, stay close, another way of saying the movement towards more uniqueness. Now, I want to it always has pathology, like we just pointed out. So, for example, the diversity politics, right, of what we might call today identity politics, in their shadow form, stay close, in their shadow form, are expressions of the pathology of uniqueness, right? In other words, on the one hand, I have identity politics, so I have a unique identity. But identity politics means that somehow some dimension of my, what seems to be my unique identity, separates me from the whole, right? I'm no longer part of the whole. I no longer recognize people by the content of their character. I'm actually paradoxically doing an identity politics, which means I start to identify people by the color of their skin. Mistake, right? And I actually need to actually be, on the one hand, deeply resonant and respectful of the unique, intimate quality of every person and of every group, every communion. And yet, we're all first brothers and sisters in the field of value. We need to recognize each other in the field of value, and we need to actually be ultimately colorblind, right? Meaning colorblind in the sense that, right, underneath color, underneath ethnicity, underneath nationality, underneath gender, right? I am an irreducible, unique incarnation of value itself, right? So that's uniqueness. It's deep. There's quality of uniqueness. Now stay with me, okay? This uniqueness moves all the way through the world of matter. Then matter explodes into the world of life, right? So the first Big Bang, right? Reality explodes into the world of matter. So there's this desire in cosmos, right? For manifestation. There's the stirring of desire in the infinite, writes Abhinavagupta in the Hindu source tradition of Kashmir Shaivism. There's a stirring of desire in what they call the highest tattvas, right? The highest levels of infinity. There's this yearning for manifestation. There's this desire, this kind of mad love, which is called a ahava lifnei bria, a love before creation, that drives reality. Reality then manifests as matter, but matter is coded with what matters. Matter is coded with value because all of reality arises in the field of value. Now, parentheses for a second. Friends, we're doing politics here. There's no politics without getting this, right? Does everyone get what I'm saying? This parentheses bracket sentence, I want to keep this bracket in our final draft, right? We're doing politics here. Without a new story of value, politics is just identity politics on either side of the aisle yelling. We need to create a shared field of value. So we're trying to create a shared field of value, which will allow us to have a shared discussion about the polis and create genuine direction, which is goodness, truth, and beauty. Okay, that's the end of the bracket. So there's uniqueness. Matter is unique. Matter keeps differentiating towards more uniqueness, from quarks, right, to subatomic particles, to atoms, to molecules, to macromolecules, to unique cells, to unique multicellular structure, to neural net and neural cord, right, all the way up until we get to human beings. We get to the depth of self-reflection in human beings. And then we go through all the structural stages of human evolution, which is an evolution to ever more uniqueness, until I move from unconscious uniqueness to conscious uniqueness. Now stay close. That's not, let's check the time. That's a perfect, right? That's not just the emergence of separateness. It's not just the separate self that emerges in the Renaissance in a very clear way. It's deeper. It's a realization that I'm not just separate, I'm actually a unique expression of the field. That's the emergence of uniqueness. So I actually realized at a certain point, early on we realize, oh, I'm part of true self. That comes pretty early. A few thousand years ago, there's this deep realization that I'm part of the field of true self. Okay. Actually, after the realization that I'm not separate from the field of the true self, I'm part of the larger whole, comes this realization that I'm also have dignity as being a separate self. I'm also separate. But then we get stuck in separate self. Right. So first, wow, I'm part of the field. And then the Renaissance realized, no, I'm not just part of the field. I actually have dignity as a separate self. But then we forget that there's a larger field. So we have to actually get from the separate self back to true self, realize I'm a separate self, but my separate self is not my entire identity. I'm not alienated from the field. I'm part of the larger field of Eros desire, part of the larger field of consciousness. It's called that true self. And then I individuate. I have a higher individuation beyond true self. I individuate as unique self. And unique self is a higher individuation beyond the ego self of separate self. It's also a higher individuation which emerges from the field, the artistic field of reality, the creative field of reality, which is the field of true self, the field of Eros value. I individuate as a unique incarnation of value. That's my unique self. Now, all of reality intends that unique self, my individual unique self. But stay close. It also intends a reality in which I can't do anything myself. Even though I'm a unique self, my uniqueness, my puzzle piece nature draws me to the puzzle. I need Team Flash. I need the band of outrageous lovers. I need the Florentine Platonic Academy with Facinio and the gang. Right? I need the Fellowship of the Ring. Right? I need what the Zoharic mystics in the 13th century called Chevraya Kadisha, right? The holy band, right? I need the intimate communion, right? Now, the intimate communion, stay close. The shadow of intimate communion would be a cult. Does everyone get that? CULT. a cult, a bad cult, right? Meaning I don't know the dignity of my separate self. I forget that. I'm certainly not in the dignity of unique self. I regress to the pre-personal because I'm afraid of the responsibility and the dignity of separate self. And I certainly can't even begin to imagine the dignity of unique self. So I regress to a pre-personal cult. Mistake. So I got to move beyond the pre-personal. I step into the personal. And in some of the old versions, by the way, parentheses, that's an important parentheses, some of the old ancient versions of true self, I'm part of the whole, are what the way they express themselves socially, religiously, is they created versions of what we today call a cult, because there was no dignity to the separate self. So we first needed to move beyond the pre-personal cults of the medieval period, in which there was no dignity to the separate self. Does everyone get that? I then move into the Renaissance, right? I move into this dignity, right, where the dignity of the separate self is the center of gravity and culture. Does that make sense? It's the center of gravity and culture. I'm now separate self. And then I realized, no, I'm not just separate self. I'm part of this larger field. And then out of this realization that I'm part of a larger field, I then individuate as my unique self. So that individuation of unique self is literally happening in this generation. One of the primary intentions of this revolution, of this think tank, of this group of people, and I founded it together early on with Ken Wilber, and Ken and I spent an enormous amount of time formulating this notion of unique self, right? This is an evolution of lover self. It's an evolution of she. It's this new realization of who am I? Who am I? I'm a unique self. Okay, I'm a unique self. And I'm needed by all that is. But my unique self is not my separate self. I'm not separate from intimate communion. No, I'm in intimate communion with the larger field. And I'm also an irreducibly unique expression of the larger field. The larger field is the seamless code of the universe, but it's seamless and it's not featureless. And I am its unique feature. And reality needs my unique gift. Does that make sense, everybody? Reality needs my unique gift. Reality needs my unique intimacy. Reality needs my unique quality of Eros. Reality needs my unique contribution to the field of value. Reality needs my unique value proposition, right? Reality needs my unique presence, which is value itself. Reality needs my unique story. Reality needs my unique love story, because my love story is chapter and verse in the universal love story. So how do I live that story? So the only way I can live that story is by taking my unique risk. So now we're going to get kind of insanely personal and intimate and close, if we can. Who's up? We're now going to go stage 3. So in order to actually be my unique self, I have to take my unique risk. That's in the structure of reality. And I want to add a sentence. You cannot respond to existential risk without taking your unique risk. Right? When there's a huge risk in cosmos, existential risk, which is risk of the death of humanity and risk of the death of our humanity, you can't respond to risk by not taking a risk, right? And as you can't respond to existential risk without taking your unique risk, and your is Y with a slash O-U-R, your is our, right? There is no separateness. I'm a unique expression of the whole. I'm an intimate communion, right? I have my instrument to play in the symphony, but there's a symphony, and it's a symphony of unique selves. So to play my instrument in the unique self symphony, I need to take my unique risk. Now, what does that mean? So my unique risk is, it's the risk that if I don't take it, I die. And I have to risk death to take it. Now stay close. And I want to now add a whole dimension here. When I say you risk death to take it, sometimes you actually have to risk death. So my children at a particular moment are risking literally death, right, to protect democracy at this moment in time. It's intense. It's intense, right? So you have to sometimes risk death. That's a horror. That's a horror. That's a horror. And there's 2 insanely beautiful people I know, 2 doctors from Gaza, who've risked death, a man and a woman, right, to save people, right, in the last year. Wow. But I'm not talking about that right now. And I want to talk about something which is even closer and immediate. You can kind of catch immediately in your own life right now, which is unique risk is love or die. I either become my unique incarnation of Eros or I die. But in order to become that unique incarnation of love, I have to be willing to risk death. And what does risk death mean? It means I've got to risk some loss. I've got to be willing to risk my safety. I've got to be willing to risk my safety. I've got to be willing to risk my aliveness in order to find, or let me say it more clearly. I've got to be willing to risk my pseudo-aliveness, my pseudo-safety, to find my deeper safety and my deeper aliveness. And I have to be willing, the Zen masters would say, die on the cushion. And die on the cushion means give up those separate self patterns, those winning formulas that you've formulated or adopted early in life in order to feel safe, in order to feel like I have a place in the world. So, for example, sometimes the way a person feels they have a place in the world is by always displacing themselves. It's a paradox, right? So a person says, wow, my integrity is, and the lineage of my family is, for example, is that I challenge authority. And I'm willing to die. My father, my mother, my grandfather may have died challenging authority. And so the only way I can have a place in the world is to challenge authority. So that's good. That's good. I'm actually challenging authority in a good way. I'm self-authoring. But sometimes even that can become a pattern. And I don't feel at home in my life unless I throw myself out of every place. And so I'm going to keep challenging and challenging and challenging, right? Until I succeed in provoking, right, the people that I want to be close to and getting so mad at me that I hope they'll throw me out. Because if they throw me out, then I actually feel comfortable in the pattern of my life. You see how subtle that is? It's very subtle. My integrity is to challenge, but then my challenge itself becomes mixed with a kind of almost automatic pattern. I challenge because that's what I do. And even if my challenge is completely right, I can't actually identify what part of it's right and what part of it is the pattern that I've become accustomed to, right? So I'm audacious, but is my audacity rooted in courage, or I've just gotten used to being audacious? It's a good question, right? So my unique risk is always to give up my place of safety. But sometimes to give up my place of safety means to give up my need to provoke people to throw me out. Does everyone get that? And I just made up one example, right? But it's always, in other words, unique self always means, right, I'm willing to give up my pseudo-aliveness. Does everyone get that? And it's so subtle. I'm willing to give up my pseudo-aliveness in order to get my real aliveness. I'm willing to give up my pattern and my story and my religious story and my psychological story, which is well honed, but it's well developed. I'm really good at telling that story. I'm willing to give that up in order to be in my real story. But I'm willing to give up my pseudo success to be in my real success. And my real success is success which encompasses the whole. Right? It's not success 1.0. I'm listening to what God told me and I'm being obedient and I emasculate myself. It's not success 2.0 where I'm being successful in the win-lose metrics. Success 1.0 is kind of pre-modern success. Success 2.0 is I've succeeded in achieving status and gaining attention, right? And by the way, the most dramatic form of success 2.0 is it used to be I would succeed in getting attention for having done something worthwhile. I'm going to do something worthwhile. That will cause me to get attention. Now the worthwhile act is getting attention, right? And its attention is no longer a corollary of having done something, right? The achievement itself is attention. And instead of attention being a reward for achievement, the achievement's attention. That's the tragedy, right, of the social influencer world. The social influencer world has a lot of good to it, potentially, that is dramatically unrealized, tragically so. But the tragic form of it is, which is what's more realized today, is the achievement becomes attention. No, attention is supposed to be a byproduct, right, of depth. Okay, so success 2.0 is I succeed in putting myself forward and achieving status, and I'm successful. Success 3.0 is I actually individuate as a unique self in the field of the larger whole. I'm uniquely individuated. I'm the artist of my own life. I'm the hero of my own life in relationship to the whole. And I'm contributing to the whole. And I'm playing my instrument in the unique self symphony. To do that, I've got to get clear. I've got to first do transformation. I've got to do the inner work of classical separate self transformation. That's the first T, transformation. Then I've got to do transcendence. I've got to transcend. I've got to transcend, right, my own personal story and be in the field and just live in the field and experience the sunset and be in the depth of the art and be in the depth of the Eros and the depth of the silence, the depth of the beauty. And then I've got to go from, that's transcendence, then I go to the third level, is transfiguration. I transfigure. And transfiguration means I've transfigured. I've actually taken my unique risk. I've done the work of transformation. I've then done the work of transcendence, transformation, separate self, transcendence, true self. And now I'm in this unique self place, which I've transfigured, and I've become homo amor. I've become a unique incarnation of the field of outrageous love. And I'm an outrageous lover. And outrageous lovers take their unique risk in order to commit their outrageous acts of love. And we do that as individuals, and we do that as a symphony. And as a unique self symphony, we say, we're gonna say 1,000 no's, right? My beloved friend Suzette, I'm gonna say 1,000 no's in order to say one yes. I'm gonna say 1,000 no's. There's 1,000 places we can play. We can fill up our time with 1,000 important things. They really matter. But to be a homo amor, to be a wholemate, is to be omni-considerate and omni-responsible for the whole. I can feel the whole pulsing through me. I can feel the whole tumescent in me. I can feel the whole throbbing in me. I can feel it all happening through me. I feel the whole and I respond. I can feel the cries of the unborn, right? Like my evolutionary, I feel trillions of unborn. And I feel them calling me, and I hear them calling me. And I feel all of the past wanting to be fulfilled. And I feel all of the present, right? Lost in win-lose metrics. And I'm able to both be in it and transcend it, end the trance, and transfigure and become homo amor. And I'm willing to do my work to take my unique risk. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do part 2 next week of unique risk. This is part 1. We'll do part 2 to go like deep into what it means. But I can't take my unique risk unless I know something about my unique wound. What's my unique wound? What's my unique shadow? Right? What's my unique silliness? What's the unique art that's mine to do? What's my unique gift? I can't get there without, but we need to know something about that. We'll talk about that next week, just a little bit. We'll finish just a little bit. And we're going to actually do an entire course that starts on the 24th, I believe. I think it's next Sunday. Is it next Sunday? Krista, is it next Sunday? Krista, is it next Sunday? Yes, it is. It's next Sunday. We're going to start a course 3 weeks, right, on unique self. It's going to start right after One Mountain. And we also started a group Holy of Holies, and I'm going to ask Krista to kind of come on and, if she can, to chat about that a little bit. And I'm also just inviting everyone to join us in One Mountain and join us in kind of the One Mountain people. We're going to try and to do some kind of prayer during the week together. But we're in this revolution, and to be in this revolution, right, we have to take our unique risk. And paradoxically, for me personally, the unique risk is to actually stay focused on enacting this great library of value with you. And I'm hoping that's your unique risk as well, because I can't do it. We're the Fellowship of the Ring. We can do it together, right? We're Team Flash. We're family. Right? We're Team She. We're Team She. Right? We're Team Humanity. Right? And we're doing this radical thing. We're saying we're going to take responsibility for the whole thing. So David, give us the code. Okay, give us the code. Give us the second code, if you will, code 2. And then we'll turn to Krista. And I just want to just like crazy thank you to everyone, right, for taking our unique risk together. Unique risk is not simple. It's not simple. It's a big deal. It's a big deal, right? And it's risky. But here's the thing. If I don't take my unique risk, I die. And last sentence, right? And we talked about this in the group Holy of Holies. It's not everyone's unique risk to take responsibility for the whole. Right? Most people don't even know what we're talking about. And they're beautiful people. They're doing other things. It's great. But we're here because we're allured to this, because we know we need to do this, right? We're self-selected. That's what we talked about in the group Holy of Holies. And for us not to take our unique risk is actually to die. Right? So the only aliveness is in taking that unique risk with each other. So thank you. Mad love, mad honor, mad respect, mad desire for she, for all of it. Sure. David.
So here's this week's evolutionary love code. Your unique risk is always something that you can easily, in the public realm, get away with not doing. You access your unique risk through deep listening in the quiet, through prayer, or through asking a group of close friends who know you well what it might be. We're accountable in life for one thing. Did we take our unique risk that all of reality needed us to take? You don't take your unique risk once, you take your unique risk every day.